want to start? Yeah.
We just need to make sure you're close enough to be picked up for our remote streaming participants that are watching the session remotely. So just stay close, but you don't have to acknowledge it.
Okay. Cool. Good morning, everyone. Suje Alejandra, Sega Denesuthane Mi'kmaq, Gotsea Te Cold Lake First Nations, and Listuguj Mi'kmaq First Nations. Masi Nagainda, I'm really grateful to see you guys here today. Thank you for joining us for this breakout session. Thank you for joining us on the second day of the gathering, and for being here, and for showing up, because really that's what it's about, right? It's just showing up and being there, and that's half the battle. And the conversations that come and the dialogue that flows from that, that's what's meant to be, right? So I'm just really grateful for you all to be here. I'm a program coordinator at Indigenous Clean Energy. I am a First Nations youth myself. And I am Masi Nagainda. I'm really grateful to see you guys here today. Thank you for being here. And I'm joined today by Michael Ross, who is a brilliant man. I bring the fun spice and he brings the fun tech. Yeah, he's got that techno lingo. So if you guys have any questions about specifics regarding operations and maintenance and that de-risking risk assessment and all of that, he's the guy to ask. Jamie. Hey.
Is he a funny engineer?
I like to think I'm funny, but whether or not other people do is another story.
He better be.
Funny engineer over here.
Oh, yeah.
We do. I would like to acknowledge everyone in the room. I see a lot of familiar faces, which is amazing. That makes my job a little bit easier, so I appreciate that so much. And I just want to acknowledge the beautiful territory that we're on here today. So thank you to the Mississaugas of the New Credit for allowing us to join them and have these discussions on their land and be part of that and work together. Because in the theme of de-risking, energy project operations, maintenance, and this collaborator piece I think is really, really important. And the theme of partnerships has been echoed throughout the past 2 days, and I want that to continue on here. I ask you guys to bring your best foot forward and your voice in truth. I think about Murray St. Clair and the message that he carries about being truthful and working together. I just ask you guys to remember that as we move through today's breakout session. And so, sorry, I just got a little emotional. I would like to invite, with that opening, Mike to talk about the more technical side of de-risking energy project operations, because I think it's important to be able to understand, and to have a good conversation, we need to know what we're talking about today. So I invite Michael Ross to, thanks.
Thank you. So when we talk about de-risking, especially for operation and maintenance, I'm coming from a lens of working with many First Nation and Inuit communities on their renewable energy projects, but it's not specific for isolated communities, but I'm coming at it through that lens. And there's a lot of effort right now where many communities are leading the charge on renewable energy projects. And there's a lot of focus and attention on building this project, on making sure that it happens. But once it's installed, there is that added effort to make sure that there's proper operation and maintenance on the system to keep working. I can't think of a 20, 25-year project that doesn't require any operation and maintenance. And so if you step away, it will work. It's going to not work very, very quickly. And when you come to a space of, well, it is going to work. Oh, well, we need somebody to maintain the system. It's oftentimes a reactionary process as opposed to a proactive that could be thought about of how we're going to address this. So even in the process of designing, building, implementing a renewable energy project, at what point in the stage should we start thinking about operation and maintenance? How does it fit in? And even when we think about it, it's all there to solve a problem of how it could fail. What are the risks of how it could fail? And oftentimes, human beings have a very, very bad gauge of risk. We often associate consequence with risk. We are more scared to fly, even though there's a higher risk of us getting hurt driving to the airport than flying. Risk isn't just consequence, it's also the chance of something happening. Risk is also multifaceted. There are many different aspects to risk and many different stakeholders. So even, I'm sure, as everybody pursues their renewable energy projects, there are a lot of partners that are involved to help facilitate the project to go along. And every partner has their own vision and concern of risk. And so if we look at it as not just what is my risk, but also what is your risk? Because if those risks can be identified and addressed, then your project and our ambition through partnerships can be successful. And if you identify, here are the risks, what are the different opportunities to address those risks? Because it might be my risk, but through partnerships, maybe it's easier for you to help identify that and create something greater than if we were to go isolated in addressing these operation and maintenance risks.
Yeah, that reminds me of a teaching I got one time about checking my blind spot. I might have been driving a car and almost hit someone else, but it's fine. But yeah, I thank you so much for explaining that. I needed that. Yeah, and I think that, in that theme of collaboration, teamwork is so important. And we all know, I'm sure we have an experience where we tried to do something alone that was tough, that was long-winded. And, when you're in those moments, I think like asking for help. I heard there was another person, another speaker who mentioned that. Oh, sorry. I don't know if I'm supposed to be fixing that. Oh, no.
We're good.
Oh, okay. Whoa, someone else is controlling that? That is super cool. Okay, sorry. Yeah, sorry, but asking for help is really important, and it's a sign of strength. And I want to remind you guys that when it comes to assessing risk and to thinking about what could go wrong, to find that balance between catastrophizing it, right? So like, how could it go wrong in the worst way? I think we need to, sorry. So when you're asking the question of like, what could go wrong, think about it in a way that, includes other people as well and other people's perspectives, but stay true to what you believe and what you value. And I think that if everyone brings, that value independently and then works together to create a, collaborative solution to it, or multiple solutions, right? There's not one way to fix one problem. I think that will lead to a really, really positive path of healthy, sustainable energy projects, renewable energy projects. Yeah, so I should give a little bit of background about how this session will go. So we'll start with an open dialogue so that everyone can kind of get talking and contribute about, what they think or what they're nervous about, really. Because I think, an energy project is a really, really big undertaking. And sometimes when there's this pressure of, doing this for your community, and trying to really have that positive impact on the person, on the family, on the land, that's a lot of pressure. So I think, it's important to bring that into the space so we're gonna have one open discussion and then we'll go into smaller breakout sessions. We have worksheets as well for people to use. The goal of today is to connect and to share and to understand what each other's points of view are, because there are also multiple stakeholders and multiple proponents and collaborators, I guess I should say, in a project. And so we'll do open discussion and then smaller breakout rooms. If I could ask everyone to give a high five to the person next to you, I think let's get the energy going.
That's a good idea.
Yeah. That was Oh, yeah, thank you. That's as formal as I wanted to get, this introduction. This is meant to be dynamic, right? This is meant to be a breakout session where people are like, excited and moving around and stuff like that. So, yeah. Cool. Yes, Nick.
Would it help if anyone's got any examples of the kind of maintenance stuff you need to do on the project?
Yeah.
And we could just throw some of that stuff out to anyone who's got anything.
Tech lingo right there.
We just had an inverter break. So
Yeah.
3 years of operation, 12 inverters, 1 broken. Now we've got to get that fixed. Any more examples?
Well, I think you're just about to hear Mike open up the floor in a way that we're going to find those ideas, jumping right onto the screen with our graphic recorder. Hi, Brittany. Thank you. And everyone, please see Brittany.
Yes, actually, let's give a round of applause for Brittany. This is a really wonderful tool, right? This is going to be available to all of you guys afterwards. So I think, yeah, oh my gosh, thank you, Brittany. Thank you for being here.
My name is Klaus. I'm doing diesel reduction in remote communities since 10 years. We've got 57 systems in operation across the Canadian North, including the northernmost. All 7 of the northernmost communities in North America have operating solar system of ours, and presently I have 8 containers in the high Arctic to do about 500 kilowatt installation next year. So I'm asked to give an example of maintenance. Okay, I'll give you a very unusual one. Flooding. Flooding, okay? And usually inverters are sealed, and yet the whole inverter room was flooded in Hay River. I don't know how much you're following. They were hit with big fire, and then they were hit with big flooding. So flooding. Okay, no choice. Have to send brand new inverters and then basically take care of that. But I'd like to broaden a little bit, okay, and just walk through one generic project. Risks and hurdles, connection impact assessment. We have at least a dozen of utilities across Canada, at least, and every utility has their own rules. And if it's a larger project, you need a connection impact assessment. I'm not going to name names, okay, but I have been severely delayed. I'm talking a year and a half delayed in major funded projects because the utility did not get the connection impact assessment done. We have had projects where the utility is limiting. Basically, I have a big, nice solar project that could meet 80% of the load of that school, yet the utility is not allowing me to export all of it. I can do export limitation, but basically a risk is of the utility being not as collaborative as other utilities may be, and it's always a development. If the utility has not really seen significant solar development, they will be very conservative, and it takes time. And sometimes it takes a year or 2 or 3 even to then after revisit. And I've had an example recently in British Columbia like that. Okay, so basically, so connection impact assessment, meeting the rules and regulations of the utility, which do differ across the country. Getting the material there is another challenge if you have 1 shipment a year. In the high Arctic, we have 1 shipment a year. We had a project maybe 2-3 years ago in Uluhaktuk. And Uluhaktuk is the 2nd northernmost community in the Northwest Territories. The barge was late. Okay, the barge was so late that out of a bundle of 4 projects that were quoted to be done in 1 deployment, they couldn't finish. Okay, they could only do 2. And that meant I had to send another team a year down the road. We're talking high Arctic. You don't want to work that winter. Okay, I've done it, but you don't really want to work in that. So basically, that's $50,000 extra cost right there. So basically, so transportation is a challenge. When you get there, well, air travel delays, weather delays, the usual stuff when you travel out north. But you need scaffolding, and the loader is broken. Okay, when the loader is broken, now you're putting 2,000 kilograms of material up with your own muscle. So basically, having the local equipment operational and that, finding local helpers who do show up, that's another challenge. Once the system is in operation and it's been inspected and commissioned and everything, internet connection. We do put monitoring
we're gonna keep it short because we're gonna do this exact same thing in the breakout. So we're gonna give everybody an opportunity.
Rest my case.
But that was, no, but all of that is those are, and thank you, Klaus, because, and Nick, and those are fantastic examples to give a lot of credence, and I wanna make sure that, like, there are two things that I wanna identify with what you're saying is the different risks with different parties can be the same or can be in conflict. So as an example, identifying, let's just say you're commissioning a renewable energy project. If there is a 2-year delay on the commissioning for a 20-year project, that's 10% of the revenues that the community is missing out on. But also, if the utility doesn't do their proper due diligence in commissioning and it causes more blackouts and it delays the project even further, that impedes the utility's ability to provide safe, reliable power. So all that to say is making sure that everybody who is here, your voice matters, your perspective matters, and everybody's insight matters. Sir, yes?
I just wanted to add what you said there and just sort of mention that instances like that where the utility might not do their due diligence, which results in greater blackouts, really impacts public trust as well. And
Yeah.
that's probably the biggest when you're just getting started, is earning public trust and sort of public information so that people have confidence in the project. Because how many times have you seen projects try and fail, and then the next time you approach the community and say, we're gonna have a public open house, you know, everybody come out, people don't show up because they say, well, we've seen this before and it's failed before, so. That's a
Exactly.
great one.
Sorry, I'm just,
Yeah, and I think this is great. I really appreciate the collaborators we know from a technical background being here and starting this discussion. I do want to just recognize and acknowledge how much Indigenous leadership, project leadership, community leadership is in this room. And I'm going to ask if it's okay, can we just have a show of hands? Who's here representing community, who, you know, not from that? Good. And for those of you who are here from a more technical collaborator's perspective, please know when we, like, the bottom line, Indigenous-led clean energy futures, these are led by communities and your project partners. So even at every level of these technical discussions, your partners in community are there to guide solutions. This technical part is just one piece of the puzzle. It is part of the broader vision, and it really does need that grounding in community. So as we have those discussions today, please keep that in mind and look to these leaders to help guide our discussions as well. Thank you.
yeah.
I do
And-
want to connect, actually, Bonnie, what you just said to what you also said, Cameron, about this public information, right? It's all about communication at the end of the day. Like, you know, I am asking Michael Ross from Yukon U, so also a northerner, you know, to talk about and to explain what this means, because I think if everyone has that same kind of understanding of what we're talking about, then we can move forward on that same wavelength in a way, right? Like if you come in with your language and expect other people to understand, right? Like there's going to be a block at some point, right? There's going to be a hurdle that you can't jump over because simply you're not speaking the same language. So I do want to keep that in mind, and especially with consideration for our Indigenous community members and knowledge keepers and environmental stewards, right? Like respect their language and how they want to communicate and what matters to them, because, you know, it might not even be English, right? They might take you on the land and say, look, like this is the problem that I'm having. Let's go look at it. Let's go feel it. You know, let's go experience it together. Maybe that's a solution to figuring out, you know, how to move forward in a good way. So yeah, that's my 2 cents. I think communication is really key.
Yeah, and I'm just going to give one quick example of risk. And let's just say snow accumulation on a community-led solar project. Some people might think that's not a huge risk because, again, risk isn't just consequence. What's the probability of snow accumulating on a solar panel? Pretty high in the wintertime in the shoulder seasons. And with snow accumulation, like with partial covering or full covering of the solar panels, it significantly degrades the output. So how is that risky? Well, one, what if you didn't think, well, we need to have somebody trained to do that? And you think, well, what's the consequence of that's a very low risk. What if somebody brushes too abruptly and they break the solar panels? What are the outgoing consequences of that? as Cameron was saying, in terms of the social risk. What if it underperforms and then the community's like, this project doesn't meet our expectations? How does that impact ongoing future community-led projects in terms of making sure that there is that community support and that engagement? What if the local economic development opportunities were dependent on that revenue stream from the solar project? That could be hindered. So even the risks and the potential consequences could be multidisciplinary, but also affect multiple stakeholders. But one thing, even though I say that, yes, everybody in here has a voice, everybody's perspective is very important, because we want to capture the holistic risks and the holistic consequences to whom, if there's an opportunity for the operation and maintenance to also be led by the community in a way that's meaningful by the community, then you have the authority to say how you want to address that risk.
Yeah.
Quickly, my name is Jacques Hiwat. My Indian name is Mesquananish Retiaha. I'd like to present the de-risking in a different way, not from a technical perspective, but from the perspective of a partner that a community may not think of as a partner, but a finance company who will come in and say, okay, we will help you get this project off the ground by providing capital. And if they don't do this, they should be smacked around, but they will look at risk from three perspectives: short, medium, and long term. And within the long term, you will have your major maintenance reserve requirements. So within your loan agreement, there will actually be a maintenance schedule. So in that respect, the institution, usually a life insurance company or a pension fund who is looking at doing the financing, will assist you in basically working with you and the engineer to turn around and say, what is my major maintenance schedule? How much money do I have to put aside today? And that is perhaps for a lot of people who may look at de-risking the project only with the engineers, you may look at your finance guy or person who will provide significant assistance in turning around and establishing both a schedule and funding to make sure that you come up with those maintenance requirements.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Mostly
Go ahead.
Jack.
Thank you. And when we talk about risk, this might sound scary about like, oh, this is why I shouldn't be pursuing it. But what we're doing is the opposite. Is we're identifying it now so it's set up to be as successful as possible throughout the entire project lifespan. And everything that Klaus, Jacques, Nick, Cameron, and Bonnie were talking about, they're all real. And so everybody's coming in with different expertise, different perspectives. So what we want to do is we want to capture that. So as best practices to say, hey, sometimes we don't know what we don't know. And so I'll pass it off to talk about the collaborative exercise, but that's the purpose of this.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone, for contributing. Thank you so much for identifying those. I think the finance piece is a really important part of this. And yeah, I do want to echo that. I think I said this earlier, like, it's okay to be nervous and it's okay to not know the answers, but, we'll plan, and things will just happen. But I think the point is that we work together, right? And if something goes wrong, you know who to call. Right? You know who to call, you know who to email, you know who to get in touch with, because again, like you can't solve a problem on your own, or you might just like run into the problem again. But yeah, so in terms of the exercise, I think it's really important to hear from the different perspectives and lenses. We heard from a finance lens, we heard from a northern lens. Is there anyone else who feels that they want to share? Yeah. Evan.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Evan Yassi, and I'm Denner from northern Manitoba, Teduli Lake to be exact. We're a remote fly-in community. And I took an interest in this topic because we're at the crucial stage of the beginning negotiations with the utility. However, as was mentioned earlier, you know, there's some connection impact assessments that need to be done and other things that the utility is kind of considering while we're negotiating with them. But at the beginning stages, well, when we're identifying all the risk management and the collaborative approach, what is the best way to approach the utility in making them feel comfortable with the partnership and them looking after their assets, and at the same time, you know, welcoming the Indigenous community as a partner? Because right now we're in the beginning stages of negotiating with the utility, but the utility is starting to you know, come up with all these other things that they have to look after, but at the same time, they could be killing our project because we have certain deadlines to meet with funding agencies and all of that. And right now, we're in a crucial stage of negotiating with them, but we just had a meeting this morning again with the province, and they're telling us to negotiate with the utility, but the utility is coming back at us with all these other things and kind of putting this whole project in jeopardy. So they could kill it. So I'm open to, you know, suggestions, ideas as to how I can go home and sit down with my team and come up with a good plan to make sure that the utility's on side with us before they kill the project. So that's why I'm here. Thank you.
Yeah, merci, Evan. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for sharing, and thank you for being so honest. It's important.
The other thing I was going to add is, just to kind of speak to that, is around policy and how policy is developed, and the way in which policy is communicated to industry as well, but also when policy is being developed at the governmental level. So I think there's a lot of things that need to be considered, and going back to transportation, up in the high north, flooding, and the timing around how projects are unrolled, considering the season, considering the landscape. And the other one obviously is capacity. And I truly believe that there needs to be a lot more creativity put into Indigenous capacity building, and not only on the government side, but also on industry side. And, you know, again, not all of us are wanting to be on the ground to do some of the actual installations. Some of us want to be in project management and planning as well. And part of it is also the regulatory side of it as well. As Indigenous people, we need to be in all levels and phases of project planning. And capacity can only be built, true capacity can only be built if we're at the project planning phase, and not as an afterthought, but at the beginning. And for me, coming from the Northwest Territories, it's been a little bit frustrating because there's not too many Eileens running around, and particularly in project planning phase. So I think with regards to policy, that is something that can be addressed. And the other one is like this whole notion around IPPs, Indigenous Participation Plans. I think that is something, actually I think it's a fantastic idea, but I think that notion also needs to be introduced to government as well, and pretty much across the board.
Yeah, Masi, thank you. I you know, that reminds me of Albert Marshall's two-eyed seeing and using the strengths of you know, all the different ways of knowing, and I think that relates to lived experience and, you know, how to build capacity in communities, and that goes back to you know, prevention, mitigation, and planning, but also like planning for the brilliant, you know, minds that are coming in and who are going to be seeing that project through afterwards. I think that's really important, and I want to acknowledge that, yeah, like you do a lot of hard work, and it's important to be able to share that with others and trust that the person coming in after you, you know, like the project will be in good hands. And so I hear you on that. I think that's also really important, is to build that capacity and you know, bring in mentoring and shadowing and you know, learning by doing and trusting each other.
Just two more, and then we'll do the breakout session.
Okay.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Sarah Jane Soulier, and I work for a consulting company. But prior to consulting, I used to work for a utility, so a major utility here in Ontario. And I think what you were talking about, the policy can be changed, but we also need advocacy. So while I was at the utility, a lot of the nations here in Ontario often were advocating for the delivery charge, for better relationships with communities. So oftentimes the relationship was something that we really kind of built upon. I was there for over 9 years, so working with communities directly and building that relationship kind of got us to a good place when we started negotiating on 2 transmission lines at the time. And that really helped facilitate those discussions, and also the capacity. Like, I had huge budgets for communities to utilize, millions to utilize those budgets to hire their own lawyers and consultants so that they could be brought up to the same level playing field as the company I worked for. So oftentimes communities did not utilize those budgets, and I had millions in those budgets, and they were never really utilized. So I'm hoping things have changed now. I've kind of moved on from that company. It's been over 2 years now, but there's budgets. There should be budgets that will help communities negotiate with the partners, like I guess Manitoba Hydro. So.
And
Yeah.
How do we get creative with deploying those funds, right? Like, where do those dollars go? Who gets to kind of, you know, participate and actively like put those to good use, right? And see that value, right? Because I think value goes beyond dollars. Like, I think
Right.
all the proponents or all the collaborators need to know, like, what are they in it for, right? Coming back to the why. I think that's a really good starting place, is you know, starting with your why, like as a person in participating in the project.
And then Rosa, and then we'll do the breakout.
Yeah, okay, awesome.
Hi, I'm Rosa Brown. I'm a senior policy analyst with the Pembina Institute. Prior to that, I had the incredible career experience of working on the Old Crow Solar Project with some people who are also in this room, Nick Hawley and Dr. Michael Ross. And I just want to say, like, one of the reasons that project has been successful is because it had such strong community support right from the beginning. And I think about our experience in building that project, and one of the biggest risks is going from a project that has a lot of community support, and then you go into that deep, dark, very, very difficult time of actually building the project, and you get into the weeds of engineering and power purchase agreements. And the risk is that you're going to lose the community along the way, and you emerge at the end, and the community has had some updates, and they know about the project, but they're not really as in touch with championing the project as they were at the beginning. And I think that's really critical, because all of a sudden you're saying, where are our snow sweepers? You know, and actually we haven't been talking to them directly. We've had public meetings. We thought we were doing it all right. But now we've got all this work in sort of building that capacity again at the community level. And something I heard at the Pembina Institute's Renewables and Remote Communities Conference in 2022, the next one happening in March 2025 in Whitehorse, was somebody on a panel said, our project was a community capacity building project from day one. And I thought, man, I wish that's what we had done with the Old Crow Solar Project, instead of sort of seeing capacity building as a later stage. So that's one of our lessons learned. And I just wanted to also quickly address the comment that was made earlier about working with the utility and utilities putting up barriers. One of our learnings was that the utilities have very valid concerns about grid stability and all these really difficult things that I certainly didn't understand. And one thing that really helped advance our project was having the advisors who could help explain those things to us. So we sort of meet the utility at where they are with their risks, and then be able to kind of form those productive partnerships instead of seeing the utilities as the big bad wolf in the room. It's really building that relationship that's critical.
Okay, so we'll have Bonnie Van Tassel, Senior Manager at Indigenous Clean Energy for the IODI program. She'll introduce the breakout activity.
Thank you, Ali. And look, I appreciate everyone that's here today, sharing some of those in-the-weeds details. They pop up and become big problems when we don't give them the attention they need when they need it. And so I just want to speak briefly to the framework of the activity that we have planned. It's pretty simple, and it's an opportunity for folks who are here from communities to, have a short-term team of collaborators with them to discuss these issues. So Evan, thanks for being the fantastic segue to start that today. We have microphone. We have some worksheets, and I've got 11. We have room for 11 groups. So, group of 6, 7. Please don't go more than 8 in your groups. And I'm going to invite folks who. Oh, hold on, just before you pass those out, please. I would like to invite folks like Evan and folks who are leading projects from a community perspective, those Indigenous leaders that would like to form like the nucleus of those working groups so that the collaborators in the room can talk about specific project needs. I would like to invite you to form groups around these, and then folks can come to you. But also, this is a great opportunity to rub elbows with people with a variety of experiences who you may not already know yet. And I'm expecting, I hypothesize, that we will kind of tap into some of the knowledge that comes from the lived experience of doing the things. And I can say that, we look at folks whose experiences through academia and credentialing, put them in a very identifiable space of expertise. We know we can go to those people for very specific things, but we must spend more time valuing and listening and understanding from lived experiences. And so that's the challenge. How can we move beyond just what we learn in school and learn through specific jobs into the more holistic, human connected and connected to community approaches that we can take to be innovative, okay? And thank you, Eileen, about the creativity aspect, because this is really what it is. Are we willing to sit down, roll up our sleeves, and do the thinking of understanding every single piece of this together so that we can approach the problems together? So the worksheet that we have is similar to what you'll see on the screen here. So we have risk identification, asking you to identify a risk, start with one. We want you to assess that risk, just saying, what are the potential threats here? How likely is it to happen? Then we'll move into discussing with your group about how could you prevent or, planning for mitigation. We also then move on to how do you do early detection and monitoring for what are some of those triggers to say, oh, we might have a problem here, and then change management things. So if you see a problem coming, you avoid it. What do we have to do to future planning to inform that we want to protect ourselves because we made this choice and make sure that that aligns with our future plans? Once you've done that exercise with your group, and that's kind of summarizing the discussion, we have kind of a generic project development timeline with a planning phase, an implementation phase, and a production phase. There's some, generic activities to kind of help ground you in the thinking here, but I want you to think about what are the activities that showed up, actions, tangible things that we can point to, and where do we start doing that in the planning process? Because thank you, Rosa, for bringing up, when is the right time to initiate capacity building? I mean, thank you for the segue, because that seems like it needs to start a lot earlier for the things that you're trying to ensure go smoothly later. So this is really just a way to illustrate that proactive thinking. And so like I said, I think with the number of people we have in the room, let's aim for groups of 6 or 7. If you are here representing a specific project and you'd like to do this, just indicate to our team. We will get you a worksheet, and then I would like each of those people to get themselves to a table that we can kind of gather at. This room was set up so beautifully, and we also can move all the chairs if we need to. After about 20 minutes, we'll come back and discuss, but let's start first to make sure that the program teams that are here that want to be central to these discussions have that opportunity, and then we'll,
So do you want to set up at the tables, look around?
yeah, that's right. So for instance, Evan, would you like to be one of those folks? Okay, so folks who want to collaborate here with Evan and his project can come over to this table, and I'll just go around the room, so we'll go this way. If you have, once we work through and make sure that all the program teams, our project teams are being supported, we will have non-project discussion groups where I know a lot of the lived experiences of folks who have worked from the technical side of the space can talk about their lived experiences and how to better inform and build capacity with communities. Okay? Any questions before we break out and do this? No? Okay. Our team's going to give some warnings on timing, and then we're going to come back and summarize after. Okay? So we've got one here with Evan. And we've got some pens over in the corner here that we can bring out, or
Yeah.
Does anyone have a project that they want to talk about specifically, or do you guys want to focus on maybe a general list? And then work my way around it?
Like, you could lead one, or Julian could lead one.
Yeah, do you want to leave one? Do you want to come to this table or the one behind you?
Do you have pens and writing?
I'll go.
Okay. He's, I think Michael's getting them.